What keeps you going, and what is just the passion that's driving you?
I've traveled all over the world and I've seen it. People will come to me and they'll say, I took a Dale Carnegie course 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it changed my life.
How do you get started with somebody that is having this fear of the unknown?
Failure is, I tried to do this and I didn't achieve the result. We're going to fail all the time. That's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of times we have emotions and we don't know why. I don't know if it's ever happened to you where you're like, gosh, I'm really down. I don't even know why.
Absolutely.
But to take the time in that space and say, well, I'm sad. Okay, well, what is making you feel sad? We can have these kind of discussions with ourselves to kind of think about what those underlying things are.
Hey everyone, so excited to be here with Joe Hart. We are here at the FIO booth inside of the Young Catholic Professionals National Summit. Joe, it's an honor to have you here. I'm so grateful that you joined me in this conversation. Now, you are coming up on almost 10 years, if I looked at your LinkedIn correctly, being president and CEO of the Dale Carnegie organization, which is huge. But this is an international organization. It's been around for over 100 years. Yet nevertheless, 10 years is still a long time. And so I want to set the stage, hearing from you, what's motivating you? What keeps you going every single moment of the day? And what is just the passion that's driving you to keep on doing what you're doing after 10 years?
Well, first of all, John, thank you for having me on your show. I'm glad to be with you and honored to be with you. Dale Carnegie is an incredible company, and I know you and I were talking previously that I took the program and it truly changed my life. Yeah. So when I was a young lawyer and I took a Dale Carnegie course, it really helped me develop a much greater level of empathy and interpersonal skills and caring for other people, and also a different vision for myself. If it wasn't for taking Dale Carnegie as a young lawyer, I wouldn't have probably left the practice of law or started my own company. And so Dale Carnegie has been such an important, life-changing part of who I am that when I had the opportunity to become the CEO in 2015, it was really almost like I kind of think about it like the kid who grows up watching the Yankees and then he finds himself on the pitcher's mound one day,
I love it.
And but for me, it's a passion, it's a mission. I know the impact that our programs have on people around the world. I've traveled all over the world and I've seen it. People will come to me and they'll say, I took a Dale Carnegie course 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it changed my life. So, part of what drives me and fuels me is the reality that we all have potential. We've all got abilities and things that we can do that sometimes we don't even realize. And the Dale Carnegie programs can be a pathway to helping people discover those. And we've done it, as you said, for 113 years this year. 113 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've been honored to be a part of it for the last 10. So That's been pretty incredible for me.
Well, where is the Dale Carnegie organization at right now, and where is the plans for its future? And that you're leading it, right? And I've heard you navigated through COVID and you accelerated to the online program. Like, all of these different things are just remarkable, but what's the future now?
Well, I think the future, frankly, has never been better. I'm really excited about it. We are a global franchise organization. We've got 200 operations. We're in 86 countries. Almost all of our operations are franchised, meaning that we've got people in every region who live in that region, speak the language or of the culture and so forth, and that is in all of those different countries. And part of what's happened over the years is our company has come together in an incredible way. We truly are one Carnegie organization operating as one company to really help our clients around the world meet whatever their needs are. So they might have people who are working remotely or in person or both, or they may have people with cross-generational issues. You got 5 generations in the workplace, John, which is really incredible. And people often see things differently. You've got people who many times who have become managers and they really don't know how to lead. They were great individual performers, but now they need leadership skills. So as I look at the needs in the workplace and how dynamic the world is, and frankly, in many ways, how polarized it is and how we need to come together and have really powerful interpersonal skills, we as a Dale Carnegie, I think, are very well situated. And the one other thing that we haven't talked about yet is, what does AI do to this? Yeah. Where is AI in the equation? And I actually think that certainly in the near term, what it's going to do is to create opportunities for people. You and I, we're all going to have to really focus on being more competitive individually and making sure that we've got really stronger social skills, creative skills, interpersonal skills, communication skills, because those are the things that are really going to be at a premium at an age where AI is automating other kinds of things that maybe were more administrative or more repetitive kind of parts of our roles. So as a global company, I'm super excited about the future.
Yeah, there's so much. And hopefully we'll get time to come back to AI. I do want to lean into something that you bring up in your book and something that in my ministry is constant. This fear of failure. It comes up in the lives of men and women all the time. I was just meeting at Easter with my 20-year-old nephew, and I just asked him, I was like, so what's concerning you? And in a very 20-year-old way, he said, I just don't want to screw it all up. And so I pose that to you and say, how do you get started with somebody that is having these this fear of the unknown, this fear of future? And I know that not only did Dale bring it up so well in How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, but you bring it up in Take Command. And so somebody's in their 35, they are likewise feeling like they're going to screw it up as a father. You've got a 20-year-old who feels like, where do you start with somebody like that?
Well, first of all, I think it's the recognition. We can easily forget, right? I think when we were younger and we are trying to find our footing, we have a natural insecurity in terms of what we do and a natural fear that everything seems so big. And in fact, Jen asked me today, it's like if I were to give myself a 21-year-old version of myself advice, what's the one piece of advice I'd give? I'd probably say, don't worry.
Yeah.
I think about all the things I used to worry about when I was younger. And so recognizing, I'm older than you are, and you're older maybe than your nephew was,
Yes.
and so forth. But that's a natural place, and really to try to pour into them that, life is great. And how do you define failure? If failure is, I tried to do this and I didn't achieve the result, we're going to fail all the time. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if I say failure is something that I'm not going to view it that way. I'm going to view it as, what can I learn from this? And then really I minimize what failure is. I say, if I think about all the different things that I set out to do that didn't work out the way that I wanted to, if I viewed those as a failure, I'd probably be depressed. Yeah. On the other hand, if I say to myself, my gosh, I've learned so much. This is all part of God and the experience kind of equipping me to deal with things and to grow. And that's really what this is about, right, John? We know that it's about how do we help ourselves grow? How do we help other people grow?
Yeah. Oh, great. And let's just keep on down this pathway here, because I really like it how you bring it up here in Take Command, where you're taking command of your thoughts. You just kind of alluded to that, and your emotions. And I'd love for you to just explain that to me and to our listeners.
Well, the biggest challenge I think we all have, in fact, this is something someone asked Dale Carnegie, hey, what's the most important thing you've ever learned in your life? And he said, the most important thing is the value of what we think. If I know what you think, I know who you are, and our lives are what our thoughts make it. So sometimes we don't even pay attention to the fact that we may be thinking a certain way or have a certain point of view or a certain mindset that limits us or holds us back, or that we say things to ourselves. And so the first recognition of this is to say, I need to be aware, number one, of what I'm thinking and what my thoughts are. And the second thing that Dale Carnegie talked about is that we have the right and the ability to choose our thoughts. So when we choose the right thoughts, we're on the road to solving all of our problems. So, if I wake up in the morning, this happens constantly, right? You check your email or you go to social media and you see something there that might be like, oh my gosh, this day is going to be horrible. I've got this guy, he's just at it again. It's like, time out. What is my thought process here? Am I seeing this the right way? Where's the opportunity here, right? So I can pull myself back. And also, we were talking about this even yesterday at the workshop that we had. What are the undermining thoughts we have? Someone says, I could never do this.
Yes.
I'm too old to do this. I'm too young to do this. I don't have time to do this. If those are our thoughts, then they're going to limit us in anything that we do. On the other hand, if we can reframe those thoughts, then it can unleash the ability within us to take action. And that's ultimately what I think, if we want to be successful, action is a core part of that.
How do we move past knowledge, like we just are talking about, and into actual practical uses? So, and I've experienced it myself, so be the first person to jump in and put myself into this camp here, where I know I have these negative, limiting, fixed thoughts, right? and I know that I need to work past them. And I do good for a day or two, and then it falls off. And so the framework that I have, or the framework that somebody might have, is insufficient to carry us through in the long run, right? To help really change our neural pathways, right? To where we can start thinking more positively. I'd love to dive in just a little bit deeper there. And how do you speak to somebody who's like, yes, I know this, but I still can't do it, right?
Yeah,
They're still having that fixed.
It's a great question, and it's something I think everyone struggles with. And the analogy I think that people can relate to is exercise. If I said to myself, I want to be fit, say, I like to run marathons.
Yeah.
If I said, I want to run a marathon, but I'm not willing to do the training. I mean, there's daily training, there's weekly training, there's monthly training. If I'm going to find myself at the starting line of this race, I've got to prepare. But there's a certain discipline in that. And it's the same way with our thoughts. If I am aware of my thoughts and I create time to focus on changing an underlying thought, I do it once or twice, but I don't come back to it, why would I expect that that's going to change? These are habits, habitual ways of thinking. We're trying to create mindsets that become habitual to help us as opposed to habitual to hurt us. So one question I would ask to someone is, do you have a routine? What is your routine? How do you create space every day, even a little bit, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to think about where you are, what went well today, what did not go well, what do you want to change? Do I create space to be intentional? So for me, the first 30 to 45 minutes of every day is doing that. Part of it for me is it's deeply wrapped up into prayer. I spend that time praying, but I might look back and say, okay, so, you're familiar with the Ignatian exercises and
yes.
the concept of examine and saying, okay, so what do I have to be grateful for? Where is the Holy Spirit working in my life? But also just from a pure practical sense, what do I need to change? What went well? And so forth. And so that's really, having that space is the start of creating a habit. But there's a daily discipline. And that, again, no one's going to be perfect. You're going to have a bad night's sleep or a bad day, or maybe you don't do it in the morning, but you miss a couple days. But it's the ability to pick ourselves up and keep on saying, I have to be intentional about how I think, about how I grow, about my emotions, and so forth. And if I don't create that space, it's very, very difficult to happen on its own.
That's so good. It's that rule of life. Men, it is the month of May, which is also the month of Mary inside of the church. And as such, for all new Catholic Gentleman Plus annual subscriptions, I'm able to offer you this incredible Catholic Gentleman Rosary. This is a rosary that is designed by Jonathan Conrad and his team over at Catholic Woodworker, just for the Catholic Gentleman. It has St. Joseph the Worker on one side. It has the three hearts of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph on the other side. It has the pardon crucifix. It is incredibly strong, very masculine. I love it. Put 9 months into it. You also get all of the great content that we have inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. There are 27 sessions exclusively for men, going to the heart of what it means to be a man today. We break it up into three main categories. That's self-mastery. That's all the struggles that we're dealing with. Relationships, how to be a better husband, father, son, friend. We also go into our spiritual life with things such as fasting, prayer and work, our Blessed Mother, and many others. We have guest experts like Father Donald Calloway, Father Ambrose Christ, Devin Shad, Jason Craig, incredible men that are all just in the mission to help you and to help men grow in masculinity and grow in holiness in 2025 and beyond. We've got some great sessions coming out. We've got some mini courses coming out. So if you head over to CatholicGentlemanPlus.com, it is the best way to support the Catholic Gentleman. You're going to get that Saint Quote book. You're going to get this incredible rosary, and you're going to get exclusive access to everything inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. Just thinking about it, we also give you daily saint quotes directly to your phone in inbox or SMS. We give wallpapers to remember what prayers we're doing. We give ebooks inside. There is so much going on inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. Again, best way to support us. Please head over to CatholicGentlemanPlus.com. Pick yours up today. Keep us in your prayers. You are in ours. God bless. What about tumultuous life changes, like a career transition or welcoming a new child into the house or moving your family like you did from Michigan? My wife's from West Bloomfield, so there was a connection.
I grew up there too, yeah.
So great. So, but to New York, right? Like, How do you keep your frame of mind in controlling your thoughts when insecurities might set in because there's just such a new life change?
Well, part of it is to realize that there will be life changes and there will be disruption, and we're going to have different emotions about that, and that's okay. I mean, we can have anxiety or stress at different points in our lives, but being able to be aware of that and understand why that is. I might be, struggling with emotion because I've got a child that's keeping me up at night every night, and I'm up and I'm tired. But just recognizing I'm going to do the very best I can. That's part of it. But even, a lot of times we have emotions and we don't know why.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if it's ever happened to you where you're like, gosh, I'm really down. I don't even know why.
Absolutely.
But to take the time in that space and say, well, how would you define if you had a word? I have this conversation sometimes with my kids. They're like, oh, I'm really down. I'm like, oh, well, give me a word. How do you feel? What's the word? Well, I'm sad. Okay, well, what is making you feel sad? I mean, we can have these kind of discussions with ourselves to kind of think about what those underlying things are. But we're going to have disruptions. Going back to your point.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when we moved from Michigan to New York and then moved back from New York to Michigan, and it was very disruptive and very stressful. And it was a period, but I continued the discipline of the daily focus and so forth, and that really helped. So it's a recognition partly of just what we're going through at a particular time.
Excellent. So talk to me about your own discernment, because you were a lawyer and then you started a company and you sold a company and then you moved to, I mean, these are big decisions. You welcomed 6 kids into your life. I mean, these are huge decisions. So talk to me a little bit about your career discernment, because I know that in the men and women that I coach or I mentor, there's always this, we go back to this fixed mindset of like, it's all going to fail. If I do something, and then it keeps them from doing something. It keeps them from moving forward. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your discernment when you went from starting a company, selling a company, changing to be such a prominent and prestigious position here with Dale Carnegie.
Well, again, I appreciate the question. And I'll tell you that some of this is hindsight, right? Because we grow and mature. So when I left the law, I could be wrong, I was 28, 29, something like that. Excuse me, I went into business. I started my first company around 32, and then sold that at around 37. So all along the way, there were different experiences that are forming me. When I started my first company, and we had 9/11, and it was just a traumatic time for the country, and it was a traumatic time for our business, and I was worried that we might not make it, and we made it through. And part of what I learned in that experience, it gave me confidence. And so ultimately, as I've gone through different experiences in my life, I've gained more confidence and more competence just because of the experience, right? And so I think that shapes it. But when I first made the decision to leave law and go into business, I was very nervous about it. And you spend a lot of time from high school to college to law school. I had a vision of being a lawyer, joining a big firm. I did that. I was on a track that I think would have led me to partner, and my goal at that time was making a lot of money. And when I realized after taking the Dale Carnegie course, again, this course was pivotal because it really challenged me my vision. And when I made the decision to leave the law, I was very nervous. I was like, number one, is anyone going to value my legal background in business? Lawyers have a view that this is all I can do. I've been trained as a lawyer. I'm a lawyer, once a lawyer, always a lawyer. I have many friends who are lawyers who are not super happy 30 years ago. They're still lawyers today. But it was nervous. I had a mentor who said to me, because I got this great job offer, and I told him I was nervous about it. He said, look, there were 2 things he said. One is, and I always butcher this quote, but it was, it's not the smooth seas that make the sailor a great sailor. It's the rocky seas, the rough seas. The worst thing that happens, he said, is you could always come back into law. So, and I never looked back. Going back to that first point, the things I was worried about really weren't things to worry about. I mean, I believe God provides, and my faith is an important part of who I am. And I've had a lot of trust. So even now, as I look at the future, I'm excited about the future. I don't know none of us know day to day,
None of
hour
us.
to hour but I have trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's true when we're at a point of career transition, particularly if we've discerned it.
Yes.
Talk to our spouse or significant others about it and family about it, prayed on it. We go in a direction, and if things don't work out the way that we want, we keep on moving.
Yeah.
And if they work out the way, in my experience, they've always worked out better than I've ever imagined. I never imagined that I'd be leading Dale Carnegie. This is such a spectacular company, and I really believe it's a gift and an honor and a responsibility that I take so seriously every single day.
Yeah.
And but I couldn't have asked for that for myself. And so that's part of why I just think, sometimes you take that first step, and it leads to incredible places.
Amen. My life echoes that. I used to be a professional trumpet player, and then I turned out to be a vice president of marketing. Now I'm a chief marketing officer running a men's ministry. I mean, it's just all God's abundance, right? That shares with it. I would like to shift. We talked about relationships, and that is one of the core pillars here. It's actually one of the core pillars of the Catholic gentleman. So for me, it's always self-mastery, right, which we're just talking about here. It is relationships, and it's the spiritual life. So I'd like to dive into relationships with you and talk about the importance of honing our relationship skills and working on them. And I'd love for you to just take that in whatever direction you feel so inspired to talk about, because we have to get this right. And as you mentioned earlier, we're so divided these days. And so how do we work on those skills?
Well, the first thing I think it is to recognize is how important relationships are in our lives. A lot of times, I think we can think to ourselves that they're not that important and so forth, but the reality is that we're in connection with other people. We live in connection, whether it's in our family or our community or in our work. And, we are interacting with people, and we can interact in a positive way and develop positive, trusting, strong, enduring relationships and friendships, or maybe not so much. Mm-hmm. We could be the source of conflict. We could be the source of dissension and stress. And so, from a practical, there's a practical standpoint, there's a religious standpoint. From a practical standpoint, I think the most successful people in life are often those who are really good in relationship. If I want to have a successful, thriving marriage, there's things I need to work on in myself to be a good husband and a good father. And if I'm going to be an effective leader in business, it's the same principle. So on the other hand, we've got people many times who get to a certain level of their career and they can't advance because they're just not adept at dealing with people. And maybe sometimes they lack the interpersonal skills. We see this in Dale Carnegie all the time, where they're an IT person, they're an engineer, they're an accountant, whatever they are, and I'm not trying to stereotype any particular industries, but those are the ones where people often come to me and say, hey, generally speaking, how do I, and their careers open up once they learn the skills. And this is the good thing, John. I think all of us could learn the skills of building strong relationships. The Dale Carnegie principles, and going to Dale Carnegie, no one knew how to create thriving relationships like Dale Carnegie. No. That's why How to Win Friends and Influence People has been a best-selling book for 89 consecutive years, one of the best-selling books ever written.
Yeah.
So it is because he has defined and understood some core principles in human interaction that if we follow those things, we can build really effective relationships.
Yeah, having read How to Win Friends and Influence People a couple times, and just on its face value, it might seem manipulative, because that's how it could be phrased as the intent. But really, it's not that at all. When you go into it, it's all about learn to be a good listener, like basically be a better human. And this is going to build relationships. And so I'd love for you to talk about things like trust or, listening and some of these skills, and how individuals that might not come by them naturally, maybe they didn't have parental figures that help them or siblings that help them. Where would you start with an individual like that?
Well, let me just back up to something you said, because I know that sometimes people will talk about manipulation. And I recently had Guy Fieri on my podcast.
Great.
And he talks about his life before he read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends, and afterwards. And he said, it's not about manipulation, it's about consideration. Dale Carnegie made this point himself that, when people are false, when they are trying to put on a front and so people see through that. And what his principles are all about is authentic, sincere, relationships with other people. It's about it's about a new and a different way of life. So that's really what it is that we teach. And for the person who comes at this and says, geez, I've always been so shy, or I don't know how to engage people and so forth, all of those skills are learnable. That's the exciting thing. I mean, if this was like medical knowledge, some people are going to be doctors and some people are not going to be doctors. Some people have the competence to learn certain fields, and others maybe less so. That's just not something that called for me. But all of us can learn the skills of how to be an effective listener and how to make someone feel important and to do it sincerely. And when we're in a difficult conversation, say we work together and I've got to have a tough conversation with you. I could begin in a friendly way. I could begin with praise and honest appreciation. I can point out my own mistakes before yours, and then get to the heart of, hey, how do we work on this together? So, what these skills are about, and again, they're all learnable,
Yes.
is about how to really be effective. And you talked about trust, John, which is clearly the most important foundational part. Well, I would say that is the most important foundational part about relationship. There's one thing maybe that precedes it, and I would say that's empathy. And Dale Carnegie's principle number 17 is to try honestly to see things from another person's point of view. If I'm talking to you, and say we've even got two different completely opinions,
Sure.
say it's even on a political opinion or something like that, I could argue about it. And Dale Carnegie says avoid arguments like rattlesnakes and earthquakes, right? I mean, like there's this no one wins an argument. But if I'm trying to see things from your point of view and I'm asking you just to understand, how are you going to feel if we have that kind of a conversation?
Yeah, so much better. Absolutely.
You're going to feel better, you feel respected, listened to, and you could be probably more likely to say, well, what do you think? And that, so trying to see things from another person's point of view is a foundational way to build trust. And then trust is essential in any positive relationship.
Yeah, I have experienced that in my own life, of course. You remind me of a podcast I was listening to not too long ago where there was a lawyer on there, and he talked about avoiding arguments, Dale Carnegie, and he even mentioned that the only thing you win in an argument is the first person to apologize, right? There's just not that relationship that can be built on it. Let's talk a little bit about Dale Carnegie's first principle and not criticizing, condemning, complaining. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I feel like we live in a culture of people who complain all the time. And I know I had Dr. Kevin Majors on my show. He's a Harvard lecturer, Catholic man. And he talked about how the neuroscience, when we are constantly always complaining, which I find beautiful, like the church has said this, we get Dale Carnegie who says this, and then we find ourselves in modern science now where we've got the ability to determine that our brainwaves are actually becoming shorter and more efficient at complaining. Let's actually phrase it this way. If you are a person that is prone to complaining and negative thought all the time, how do you stop doing that when it's just like 24 times a day?
Well, the first thing is, do you want to stop? Are you aware that you do it? Because some people, we've all got blind spots. So the first question is, am I even aware that I'm doing this? And then, some people could take the point of view, it's just the way that I am.
Yeah.
You can love me or leave me. Okay, well then there's probably no hope in you changing from that particular thing. People aren't going to change unless they want to change. Assuming you've got someone who's aware that they need to change and then they want to change, from after that, I might even say there's a couple different strategies. One would even just be paying attention to what it is I'm saying, trying to think about whether or not it is critical or complaining, or if there's a different way to say it. Sometimes, I find actually going to other people and say I'm talking to you, say, John, I've really come to believe that I'm criticizing too much. I don't like that about myself. It's something I want to change. Is there something you see in me that you'd recommend that I could change in this? And you would say, oh, no, you're fine. Well, is there one thing that you think I could do? Well, one thing would be is when we're having a conversation about this, okay, great. And then the only thing I can say at that point is thank you for telling me that, because you're giving me visibility.
Sure.
But, sometimes we can recruit other people to help us, to enroll other people to help us and so forth. And but if it's something, going back to your question about systemic behavior change and trying to create that habit and so forth, then it's something we need to be committed to over a period of time. And if we do that, we'll make the change.
I love it. I'm so glad that you put that framework on, because those are such important principles, is that we have to be aware of it and we have to desire it for us to move forward in that direction. For the last part of our conversation here, I would like to talk about family life.
Okay.
I have 6 kids. They're younger than yours, 13 to 17 months. I know you are blessed with 6 children, some of them here. And so what are some of the Carnegie principles? What are some of the things that you do within businesses? And I think I heard in one of your conversations that you guys have helped 400 of the 500 Fortune 500 companies and thousands upon thousands of other. What are some of the similarities? We'll start there and then we'll go to differences. What are some of the similarities in the principles of leadership that you are teaching businesses that you have found really help fathers become better husbands and better fathers?
It's interesting because Dale Carnegie has 30 principles. If you read How to Win Friends and Influence People, there's 30 chapters, one principle for each chapter. We have those principles embodied in what we call a golden book, which you can get for free on dalecarnegie.com or the App Store. You can download or Google Play Store. But those principles have great overlap, I think, not only with business relationships, but also with our spouse, with our children. Excuse me. Sometimes they're a little harder. I have found that don't criticize, condemn, and complain is easier in the work environment than sometimes in the home environment.
Sure.
Particularly when, I've had my kids said, "Oh, you're the worst CEO of Dale Carnegie. You're always criticizing." I'm like, just pick up your room, okay? It's like I've asked you like 100 times, So, but I do think that there is if we look at some of the things, say one of our children does something wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. We could be quick to just jump on them, to get really upset at them. What does Dale Carnegie teach in business? I mean, someone could do something in business that there's a very significant financial impact in the business. Am I going to yell at them? I guess I could, but maybe that's a valuable person in the company that I don't want to lose that person. And it's also not the way I should treat someone to begin with. And I shouldn't treat my child like that. So, begin in a friendly way is something to really sit down and to start with that kindness, to ask questions instead of giving orders. Hey, son, what happened here? Could you tell me what happened? Why did you do this? And so forth. So those kinds of principles still apply. So I can't tell you, John, how many people over 10 years have told me that the Dale Carnegie principles have saved their marriage. As recently as just about 3 weeks ago, I was in Japan. Okay. And a man came to me who was almost in tears. He had read How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said, my wife and I were on the verge of divorce. I took these principles, I really started to apply them, and to treat my wife differently, to listen to her, to give her honest and sincere appreciation, to ask questions, all these different kinds of things. And it's changed our marriage. And I've had that happen so many times. I'd like to think that as a result of these principles, I'm not only a better business leader, better coach and mentor to the people with whom I work, but also I'd like to think a better husband and a better father. So to your question, the principles, it goes to who we are as people. That's and right. how we are living our lives.
That's so good. Tell me, you were just in Japan and you have lived 10 years in a very, I would say, and actually before that, you were running your own company. How did you balance the family work life? How did you prioritize your family when you're traveling internationally all the world, when you're in such a high profile position that has so much demands put upon you? How did you keep yourself centered to love your family as they needed to be loved?
If I'm going to be completely transparent, I would say that I've gotten better at it over the years. My heart has always been on my family. I've always loved my family. I've always tried to prioritize my family. There was a stage in my career where I was traveling so much, and I just tried to do the very best I could to be with them when I wasn't traveling. And I think, especially over the last 10 years, I've just really made it a point to prioritize my family. I have to prioritize. There's nothing more important than my family. Right. And as important as my business is and my purpose and my work, it's critically important. I have to make sure I'm prioritizing my family and the health of my family and my relationship with my wife. And it just is deliberately saying, I'm going to make time. I have made time for father-son, father-daughter trips. So when I went to Japan, I took one of my daughters with me. And we had a couple of days just to go into different parts of Japan in between the work that we had. My mother is 91, and she always says, "Oh, you're so busy." I'm like, "Mom, seeing you is important to me. I want to see you." She's like, "Oh, I don't want to be a burden." You're not a burden. I love you, but I have to make that happen. I think, we have to be very intentional. This goes back to what is taking command. Taking command is about being intentional. And if we have space in our life to reflect every day, even just a little bit, we were talking about examine, but how am I interacting with the people in my life? How am I interacting with my spouse, my wife, with my kids, with people who are important, with people on my team? I need to create space to reflect on that and to recalibrate. And so for me, that recalibration happens every morning. I focus on some of that. Every night, I try to reflect on that for a little bit. And it becomes just a part of the routine of just who I am.
Oh, so great. Talk to me a little bit for my final question here. Talk to me a little bit about Katie. You wrote a LinkedIn post 4 years ago that I came across that was so beautiful, and it resonated and echoed within me my exact experience with my wife, who is carrying the burden and the heavy load and so supportive and so loving. And so I'd love for you to share with me just a little bit here as we end about who your wife is and how she has supported and loved you throughout your journey here.
You're incredibly well researched. I'm impressed that you found a LinkedIn post from 4 years ago. I will probably get emotional if I talk about my wife, and I know it makes her uncomfortable when I do, but my wife, Katie, and I have been married for 28 years. As you said, we've got 6 children, and she is the greatest gift of my life. And I really feel as though of all the women in the world, she's the one that God wanted me to be with. And it's my job to love her and to really bring out the best in her, and for her to do the same for me. And if I think about anything I've done in my life from a career standpoint, she's been just so incredibly supportive. Not just from me working and her really raising our kids and carrying the burden of the house when I was traveling all over the world or trying to build a business, but just her complete support. When I was thinking about, you asked about transition, when I was thinking about going from law to business, she was such a core part of that. I had an opportunity when I was in this company, the Taubman company. I had a great job, and I was going to do this startup, and I'd raised money, and I was able. My investors told me, "You don't have to leave your job. You can find someone else to run this." And my wife said to me, "If you don't do this, are you going to regret it? Are you going to be able to find somebody else who's going to be able to put the heart into this business that you would?" And I left that job and started that business, and it was hard for the family because we had 2 children, 2 babies, both under 2 years old at the time. I was the sole breadwinner of the family. We were living very tight at that time because I was starting a business and so forth. But she was there for me. And when the Dale Carnegie opportunity came, and it involved moving our family from Michigan, where we were rooted, to Long Island, New York, she was like, "I'm all in. Let's do this." And because she realized just how incredible a company Dale Carnegie is, and also how much it meant to me. And so she's just been incredibly supportive. And what I said in that post was that any success I've achieved in my business is attributable to her as it is to me. I mean, we truly are one team, and I couldn't be more grateful for her. I couldn't love her anymore.
Amen. Wow. Thank you so very much for sharing that. So a lot of men are going to want to follow you. They're going to want to know exactly what they can do, how they can pick up your book, Take Command. Where should men go? Where should women go that are listening to learn more about Dale Carnegie, learn more about all the great work you're doing? Pick up the book.
Yeah, thank you for asking, John. The first thing I'd say is dalecarnegie.com. So as I mentioned, we're a global company, and you can always read How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a life-changing book. The best experience that people can have is to go through one of our programs with a trainer, with other people in the class. That's what I did. That was life-changing for me. So you can get information about our programs at dalecarnegie.com. There's a ton of free resources there. There's a link to my podcast there. There are white papers there. There's all kinds of things that can help people in their career. That's all free on dalecarnegie.com. We have a site for takecommand.com. Also, it's available on Amazon. So if people want to buy it on Amazon, they can. It's Audible, ebook, and hardcover and softcover. So multiple languages as well. I'm not sure you can get those on Amazon, but it's in 17 languages.
Awesome.
And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So I think it's at Joseph K. Hart, and also on Twitter, Joseph K. Hart. But yeah, I'd love to hear from people and love to be connected to them.
Amazing. We'll put all of that in the show notes. You can just click on it there or press rewind and listen to it again. And so, Joe, what a blessing. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I'm very grateful. It's been an honor.
Thank you, John. And congratulations on the great work that you're doing, and really excited to be a part of this with you. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. So as we end each of our episodes, be a man, be a saint.